Good morning, guys. So today I wanted to make a video. It's probably going to be an arc of videos in talking about some of the pinnacle or all of the pinnacle moments that have been life changing. I think all of us have these in our past where we've had very defined like moments or periods that radically set us on a new path. And I want to share mine because it's part of this whole video project in sharing for my future kids, as it's like these moments are partially what's defined who I am today and has got me to where I am today, because they often changed the path. I might have been going one direction, headed one way, and then these moments kind of put me on a new path. One I think is better because, in hindsight, in looking back, I can see my life radically improved in these moments. Um, so the first one I really remember and always go back to is discovering Paleo Diet. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. And what's funny is it actually had nothing to do with being in LA because I found it online. So I was watching some videos that were filmed from years before, I think a couple years before, of this conference called 21 and Under, which is basically a conference for men in kind of this pickup arts community. Something I'll make a video of another day. And in this conference, again, I'm just watching videos and I just stumbled upon it. There's this guy called Dr. Doug McGruff who had come up, but the previous speaker was Mark Sission. And what's funny is I didn't even watch that video. I just watched Doug then bounce from Mark Sisson's talk. So I didn't have the context, but basically what Doug did in his video was he broke down what happens in the body from a scientific perspective, of what happens with fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, how they actually get broken down into the body. And basically backed up Mark Sisson's talk, which I later watched, which was about essentially a paleo diet. He calls it Primal Blueprint, Primal Diet. But Doug, what he did in my very first foray into this was real science that I had never known before, of how these three core, basically everything fits into these three core, I don't know what to call them, macronutrients. These three core macronutrients. Everything is either fat, carbohydrate, or protein. And again, broke down how these. He he explained how these broke down in the body, and I just kind of had this light bulb moment of, holy shit, like, this stuff I had never known. I don't think many people to this day even necessarily know or understand how the food they're eating actually gets broken down. And because he showed the science, it made it really clear that the recommendations of Canada Food Guide or US Food Guide were completely out of whack, because one of the fundamental truths, I guess, that we know about science and about how food gets processed is fat, dietary fat, does not equate to body fat. Even though we call them both fat, and even though that it would make logical sense, actually it's carbohydrates that get broken down into sugar that end up in the bloodstream. And sugar in the bloodstream in high levels is toxic. So then your body releases insulin, which basically is this key, in simple terms, that then shunts sugar from the bloodstream, converts it into fat cells for storage. And this is actually a survival thing. It's great. It's like we We're an animal capable of putting on stored body fat, because then we can metabolize and use that body fat for, long periods of fasting where the food's not available, or for exercise, or fight or flight moments when we need a lot of energy. We can metabolize this quickly. The problem is we live in a culture now where food is abundant. Most places, like a lot of times, 24-hour access, because the our systems of storing food means, especially in the Western world for sure, with fridges and everything, it's like we always have food in the house. It's always available. And so our bodies, the programming is not designed for a world where we have 24 access to food. But to get back to the point, is it broke some of the common misconceptions that were not known, especially at that time. This is 8 years ago. So it's like, even I think generally the public knew less about this stuff, which was, again, simply that dietary fat does not equal body fat. That actually dietary carbohydrates in excess is what's getting converted to body fat. And then to then look at Canada Food Guide and US Food Guide, where recommendation is 60 to 80% of calories coming from carbohydrates. And as I kind of dug deeper, you start to realize, like, oh shit, like the things that the guides are recommending that most people are following, if we look at it as an experiment or a hypothesis, and we actually look at the results, where obesity crisis, there's an epidemic of health issues, it's like, well, we can correlate that to when the food guide changed and went to start recommending more grains and more carbohydrates. And this is kind of what the paleo diet is rooted in, is that actually the science backs up the fact that our bodies are more designed to run on fat as a primary fuel source than it is carbohydrates. It's like carbohydrates in the natural world was a lot more sparse than it is. And the only reason today, not the only reason, but part of the reason today that most people don't realize, part of the reason today that we live in a grain-based society, and that grains, like 8 to 10 servings of grains or something like that, or that carbohydrates are, again, recommended for our primary fuel source, is grains. If you look at the whole food system, grains are one of the few things that are a commodity, that are traded at scale, because of the ability of a grain to have such a long shelf life without needing temperature control. It's made it a food source that is readily available, that we can produce in mass, we can store in mass, and we can trade by the tons. Like, grain can be shipped in massive containers all around the world, trains, boats. And so it's more of the world that we live in, and more of the ability of a grain to again have such a long shelf life, that put it on top or on bottom of the food pyramid, and less to do actually with the science and nutrition of how we interact with food. It's amazing when you start diving deep into it, and it makes sense, right? It's like, if we're trying to feed a nation, it's like we have to work with the supposed limitations of the food, as opposed to recognizing and realizing, like, oh shit, this whole scaling of food with the Industrial Revolution, with cities growing and trying to meet that demand or solve that problem, we actually got away from what is natural, which is that we're not supposed to eat a high carbohydrate based diet. And again, not to say that some people don't function well on high carbohydrate based diet. I'm not here to say there's one size fits all. I'm not even here to say that paleo is the be all end all for everyone. I just think I've had a lot of success for it. I think a lot of people have a lot of success for it, and there's probably a lot of people who don't have success for it. It's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this, to bring full circle, is for me personally, this was a life-changing moment because I really then understood more about health. It awakened something in me. It lit a fire. To me, personally, what it felt like is that I had been lied to my entire life by the government I trusted, the Canada Food Guide, this recommendation they put out. I was trying to follow this. I was all about brown rice, brown bread, brown pasta, margarine. I was super on the margarine train, where it's like I fought with my parents about butter and how butter was bad for them because I believed in this propaganda. And then, we live in an era today now where it's like margarine, the government gave the margarine companies 5 years to phase out because they realized how bad this shit is. Yet, back 8 years ago, it's like, it was the thing. It was, if you were healthy, that's what you ate because the propaganda and the marketing and the messaging had penetrated, when in reality it was not true. Now we know butter, especially grass-fed butter, is one of the most rich sources of nutrients. It's I'd say in amongst the community that it's almost considered a superfood because of the nutrient density and the richness that is grass-fed butter. But yeah, so I kind of had this moment where it's like I felt like it's like this veil of lies was lifted. It's like I was trying to follow this protocol, which like I didn't have a lot of comparison. So it's like because I was eating healthier, like I was doing all of this stuff, but I was also eating more vegetables. I was really making that part of, I was trying to eat healthier as far as I knew. But then I was actually given a different way of eating where the science made sense, and more than that, I just did it. Like, I just decided literally in that video, the next day, I started a Paleo Diet. I didn't even know about it yet because I hadn't watched Mark Sisson's talk until actually years later. But I did end up ordering his book, I think that day or within a few days, got the book, devoured it, which then really gave me the guidelines on how to jump into a primal life, a paleo life. And really that set my life on a whole path, like different path, where for the last 7-8 years I just dug deep into this health and wellness space because I was passionate about it. And not only was I passionate, but I was seeing results. I was personally benefiting from my actions. And what it really showed me, over and above all of this, and that I've used to apply to other areas, is it really showed me that once I took control of this area, health, and I took knowledge, I learned, I studied, I read, I consumed content, I watched videos, and then I applied it, I tested. What it really showed me was that as I learned and applied things, I could improve this area of my life, which was profound, especially as, 21, 22-year-old boy, essentially. It was the beginnings of recognizing, like, oh shit, it's actually in my control. Like, I've been putting off my responsibility to my doctor and to society and to the Canada Food Guide to tell me how I should eat and to be the external force that is what helps me be healthy. When in reality, I realized, like, actually, it's 100% on me. It's like, it's my actions. And like, more important and more impactful than seeing a doctor is what I put in my mouth every day, is my mindset, is my exercise routines, is my habits. And so that was such a profound change. And it's like, I didn't know it at the time, but over the years and over the struggles, to be honest, I've mentioned before, and I'll mention again quickly, is inside of this paleo journey, I actually had the worst eating of my life. So before I was generally, I'd say, healthy-ish. Paleo allowed me to find a whole new high, but inside that, I struggled for the better part of a year with binge eating, a, a dark, kind of depressive, almost self-deprecating, where the binging was actually more about causing harm, like harm to myself, than it was about anything else, really. And that I really struggled with a sugar addiction, where the thought of going to the store to getting a chocolate bar would light me up and give me a chemical release, where that was actually the most happy part. The actual going to the store and consuming the food was never actually great. It was the idea, or the time where I finally said yes. It's like when I was battling that craving for a day or sometimes a week, usually as long as I could hold the willpower. As soon as I said yes, I'm gonna go, I fucking lit up. And it's like, that was the addiction, and sugar was the drug. But that separation is how I really knew. Is because it actually wasn't about consuming the food. It wasn't even consuming the drug of sugar, which obviously gave me the hit, the sugar rush, but it was that, okay, yes, I'm gonna go, and then just like the ritual of, finding money. Often I was scrounging change, finding money, but fucking power walking to the store. I kid you not, I'd be on a fucking mission, because it's like, I said yes to myself. I'm gonna go get my drug. And yeah, so spent the better part of, so inside of this container, struggled the most, but overcame that to now this place where I don't have the sugar addiction. I don't have the binge eating. I have amazing healthy habits where it's like, for me to maintain the level of eating and the level of health is easy. It doesn't take any discipline anymore. It's like, even my waivers, even my cheat foods are so above and beyond where they were. I've literally had friends comment saying, my cheat foods are better foods than they eat regularly. And it's like, that's not a judgment thing. That's just they were just recognizing, or maybe helping me see perspective in sometimes where I was getting a little too hard on myself, where it's like you're fine. You're falling off a little is still good. And again, that's not to gloat. It's just, I think it's just where I've been able to go with dedicating 8 years of my life to this craft. And I mean dedication. I've been obsessed. Health and wellness, paleo, low carb eating has really been nothing short of an obsession in a healthy way. I believe in obsessions, topic for another video, but I've dived deep. I've read a ton of books, consumed a lot of content, practiced a lot, experimented a lot. So not only am I gaining informational value, I'm getting experiential value by actually implementing these things. So to bring it all back again, to tie this all together, this discovering of paleo for me, again, was a life-changing, and again, I think the reason I want to make these videos is that I think by understanding these moments in my life that had a profound benefit, it will help my children, and obviously anyone watching these videos above and beyond that, possibly give them a better inner looking to me. And not that you need it. For me, again, this is super selfish. These videos are for my future children and for me to document my life. And so this is just a platform for me to share anything and everything. And so, yeah, I wanted to talk about these life-changing moments that have had profound impact. And that's the first one. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm sure I'll do the next few videos talking about the next ones. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.